Hello. Today I will be talking about why you should not study political science and or international relations at university. I say this as someone who started their degree in global politics and policy at Murdoch University, and I have changed it to philosophy, largely for these reasons. Before I really get into it, I'll give some information about where political science and international relations stands with me. And there's a difference between the two terms, slightly different, but they're often used interchangeably. So, ever since I was a kid, or do you know, or now you know, ever since I was a kid, I would be taught by my brother about politics, and I always knew a little bit more about politics than other people around me, whether it was certain politicians' names or what certain parties stood for, and that was even when I was a kid. Now, I didn't really know that much when I was a kid, but I knew a little bit more than other people about it, and whenever there was history at school, or something to do with economics, or politics, whatever, to do with the social sciences, I would always be really quite excited about it, and kind of distracted by my air conditioner, the aircon, the aeroconservative, no, what about converse? Is it the conservative verse? No. Stupid political jokes. Having some chai. Anyway, in my spare time, I read a lot of books about individualism, collectivism, neoliberalism, history, economics, whatever I can get my hands on, really, psychology, whatever to do with the social sciences, but with a heavy emphasis on political philosophy, you could say. And, not only do I read, I watch the news, I watch news coverage, or coverage about the news, you could say, whether it's corporate news or independent news, both on television, online. So the reason why I look at some of the corporate news is to make comparisons of what they're saying, made with people organically in a community, more grassroots, seeing the comparison, the making an evaluation off of it. I watch documentaries quite a lot. I talk a lot to different people about it. Some which are like me, who research it all the time. Or something else, I think I'm missing it. I read academic works on it that aren't books, articles. I watch lectures given by professors online, or videos made by certain political figures or research institutes, whether it be something like the Ayn Rand Institute or the Cato Institute or whatever. I try to look at both left, right, more libertarian kind of content within contemporary politics, but if you're talking about classical political philosophy, right-wing ideas aka individualism, and more left-wing ideas, aka collectivism. I haven't planned any of this out, by the way, so that's why I'm kind of rambling on. But anyway, so, fast forward to high school, and that's when I really start to get interested a lot more into politics. And, well, do you know? No, you don't know. Well, now you fucking will. I would, go to school, and I'd feel like it was a complete waste of time, like as if I didn't learn anything. So I'd come home from school, and I'd research politics for, well, it really depends. Some years, well, some months, it was like 3 or 4 hours a day after school. Sometimes it was only 1 hour. Sometimes it was 6 hours. Some days I'd research for 8 hours or so. And, I'd some years then watch anime after it and then research more politics. But it's something that has always been one of my really big passions. And in high school, it was hard to find other people that would really want to discuss those ideas with me. I've been on all different parts of the left. I started out on the left, being your average centre-left neoliberal, you could say, all the way up to being a state capitalist, a state socialist, both the kinds of Marxists that you could be, the more libertarian one and the more state-implemented version, then eventually dissolving away, anarcho-syndicalist, anarcho-communist, anarcho-collectivist, anarchist, ooh, ow. Then kind of being more libertarian left, you could say. And I always had some elements of libertarian ideals to me, and I've always been more kind of an old guard leftist in the sense that I believed that states should be nation states. I've always been more nationalistic, whether that was originally civic nationalist to becoming a cultural nationalist, and then in some circumstances with certain countries supporting the idea of ethno or racial nationalism. However, in most circumstances, I think cultural nationalism is a particularly good ideology. Some countries should follow civic nationalism. It really depends on what that country was founded for. But that's for another video, I guess. And I'd play guitar after school, play a lot of grunge rock and all that kind of stuff. And some of the songs I've written are like, I'm Drew Biden, now sipping me my legs, where it's crack, salt and pepper where it's wet, or some stupid shit like that, or rambling about how neo-Nazis aren't real Nazis, and Marxists aren't state capitalists, and Hillary Clinton and people who oppose Donald Trump pretending to be them, and other things like that. So I've incorporated it into the more kind of hobby side of my life, which is music, rather than what I want to be involved in as a living, which is in academia or teaching or, whether it be working for some think tank or institute or whatever. So I guess with that out the way, I guess I'll also make mention of this. A lot of the political knowledge I know I didn't learn from high school, and I haven't learned it from university. I've learned it through my own methods. the methods which I stated before. Did I mention also... Hello, computer screen. Let's go to sleep mode. I'll put you to sleep, hey. So, I did a bridging course to get into Murdoch University. Because I didn't get an ATAR at school. The reason why that didn't happen is because in year 10, I had some very awful teachers who did not know how to teach at all. It's like with English, I got better reading and writing for myself rather than through the school, because I would read thesauruses, dictionaries. I was reading books that actually interested me, like Perfume by Patrick Susskind, or Junkie by William S. Burroughs, or books about globalization, and, whatever I could get my hands on, really, that wasn't teenage drama books, essentially, that the school had to offer. I was told by some of these teachers that I wouldn't be able to do the jobs that I want when I'm older, and the best thing that I could do was essentially, like go into retail or something like that, and that I was stupid or not smart, And if you know me, you probably know that politics is my strongest area of expertise. A lot of people have said that to me. But I did that I did that, that pathway into university, essentially. Took that pathway into uni. And I started my degree, and, even now I'm still doing a political unit, because my secondary major is political science, and I thought, well, I've already have some units in that, so I may as well just get it as my second major. I'll go into that later, but if you go into political science or international relations, one of the biggest problems is that it's opinionated. It isn't like applied economics where you're analyzing a market, or it isn't like business, it isn't like some of those other fields of studies where it's, here is the fact. A lot of times, a lot of classes are highly opinionated. So, I'll take an example. One of the political classes that I was in talked about how there are only 3 kinds of nationalism, and it said there's liberal nationalism, conservative nationalism, and expansionist nationalism. And as someone who has frequented the nationalist community, who has been on many different sides of it, and have talked to individuals that consider themselves national socialists, some that would support a Nazi system, because the two aren't the same. And then I've talked to some people that are fascists that don't describe themselves as that, who believe in an ethno-state. I've talked to racial nationalists before that believe in a free market. So, all the terms that I've found within these communities are civic nationalism, cultural nationalism, ethno-nationalism, and racial nationalism. And I've even seen some ideas of multicultural nationalism. However, I would think that's just an extension of patriotism, which is different from nationalism. But if you are a nationalist, you would know the idea of expansionist nationalism is bullshit, because And when, the slide was up for the lecture, they had Hitler, doing the Nazi salute thing. Yeah, he did it here too. No. He's doing this like a little puppy dog. No. And there are nationalists that say Hitler wasn't a nationalist, and I'm someone who believes that, because nationalism is about preservation of a society, of a community, of a nation, right? And you need to then define what a nation is. So different kinds of nationalists will say a nation is a shared set of principles, values, whether it be like the United States, so the principle of individual liberty, and the role of the government is to uphold those liberties and prevent private firms or foreign entities from exploiting those liberties that you have. And the government was set up in a way where there was separation of powers. So the executive isn't a part of the legislative like what it is in Australia, right? And then some people might also add, well, a lot of people would add, a lot of nationalists would add a shared sense of music, or essentially what is shared by a group of people, and you could call that culture, preservation of the culture. And then some nationalists will say, well, the history of certain races or different groups of people being in that country will also define that culture. You will also have some that say race is an important part of the culture. So in Japan, one thing that makes Japan Japan is when you go there, most of the people walking around are Japanese, and not Japanese in the sense of I have Japanese citizenship, but more so the Asian race. Whereas if you go to Australia and it's like there isn't a sense of racial homogeneity. So, and then there's some other nationalists that will add other things, or take some of them away, or prioritize each aspect differently. Like, I do think race is important within a nation. It depends on which nation, of course. But some nations it's less important than others. So I don't use it as like a universal rule like what some nationalists do. And there's also this notion that nationalism is typically right-wing. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. Can of worms to get into. So I was writing down these answers in a work booklet I had. And I wrote down the kinds of nationalism that I know. And if I submitted that work booklet, my answers would have been wrong, because I'm not allowed to bring in any outside material into the content we were learning. And I was thinking, well, here's the lady giving this presentation. Someone who likes to ramble about feminism a lot, or racial equality, or gender equality, or all these different things. And whenever there's been a good movement within politics, she'll always use a left-wing example. But whenever there's a bad movement, she'll use what is currently seen as a right-wing movement, which the current right act like the collectivists do. An example of this would be the evangelo-conservatives collectivizing all people that are gay or use drugs into a certain category, rather than what is traditionally right-wing individualism. or you can have certain nationalists that are individualists and some that are collectivists, like some collectivize people on the basis of race, when a lot of people just think being left-wing is collectivizing people on the basis of class, which has traditionally been the case, but you can collectivize people in other ways, and you can still be an individualist while making general rules about people, or you can still be collectivist while analyzing general principles of the world that isn't so much a rule, you could say, but that's one example. Or I've heard in class the alt-right really likes Donald Trump, and the problem with, well, the alt-right is right-wing, and it's like, well, you can take Richard Spencer as an example of this, who essentially advocates the death of capitalism, the expansion of state powers to create an ethno-state. He supports things like having a universal basic income for white people. He would support, I guess, other forms of welfare. He supports nationalization of industries. He supports universal healthcare. He doesn't like a lot of the wars going on currently. That's typically seen as more left-wing as of the past 50 years, I'd say, because traditionally the right has been anti-war. But ever since neoconservatism has come in, or just before even that, the implementation of neoconservatism has seen a shift in what is considered right-wing and their standard view of war. So, if you actually look at the alt-right, you have people like Richard Spencer who are essentially left-wing. And I remember when I was a leftist, I was a nationalist. I was a cultural nationalist, and I believed in Marxism at the time, or Marx supported the proletariat having firearms to ensure that the revolution happens, and it's like, well, I thought that was a right-wing idea of firearms. Oh my god, but anyway, then there's other people within the alt-right who believe in having a free market, and they're nothing little more than a cultural nationalist, or they could be an ethno-nationalist, or a racial nationalist. Or you could have some people within the alt-right who support firearms being legal, and some parts of it who don't. You can have parts of the alt-right that support drugs being legal. You can have parts of it that don't support that. The only real thing that seems to unite what is considered the alt-right is a general rejection of globalism, or they can understand the importance of national sovereignty. And I've been accused of being alt-right before, even when I was further left than most people. I've also been accused of being far-right as well, which once again, what defines far-right, because I consider myself a paleo-conservatarian, so a mixture of paleo-libertarianism and paleo-conservatism. And in regards to classical political science, then yes, I am far right, but under contemporary political science, I'm not really that right wing. But henceforth, why I use the paleo in front instead of saying conservatarian, Because I would say a lot of conservatarians are technically what I would consider neoconservatarians, which will be neoconservatism embracing certain elements of libertarianism, to make it more palatable to the establishment. And I've heard the professor say, oh yeah, the alt-right, all like Donald Trump. It's like, I've hardly met anyone who calls themselves alt-right who has actually likes Trump. A lot of them, most of them, think that Trump is a fucking sellout, And I'm also someone who used the alt-right term. That was when I was very left-wing. So, broad categorizations based on the appearance of a title. And the main issue is when you have all these different groups come together under one terminology, you see disunity within the movement in the sense that different ends of the extremities will always be pushing to make the movement about their ideology. So you see everyone else in between all the different extremes trying to pull the extremes, different elements of it, into one. But in doing so, you alienate one extreme from the other extreme. Henceforth, the movement collapsing, spiraling out of control, purity spiraling, even. Or a movement breaking off of that movement to form their own movement. It isn't like something like Antifa, where you have anti-communists with Marxists, with anarchists, with anarcho-syndicalists, with anarcho-socialists, with whatever group, right? Because they all share a lot more in common than, let's say, someone like Richard Spencer, or that hypothetical individual who supports a free market and more of a minarchist state, and believes that the community can bring about ethno-nationalism rather than a state needing it, giving more power to the state. Some of these people being anti-constitutionalist and some of these people being pro-constitutionalist, you could say, in the American sense, but, it depends on which country's constitution you're referring to. So, the two examples I've really given, and if you write an assignment, you have to write what the professor says, or it's like, there's no real room for debate. And because of that, it's highly opinionated. It really depends on who's your lecturer. I've had some lecturers at Murdoch who are fine. They're really good at their jobs. And then I've met some which are absolutely appalling. And you try to point some of this out to them, and they make excuses like, oh, well, what you're talking about isn't covered in this unit, so I'll quickly skip the criticism you made of me, and I'm not going to try and back it up. I've noticed good professors tend to provide a lot more evidence for what they say, and I've noticed, like, there was a student that said, well, what should I think about this? And I've had some professors from different units that aren't entirely just political, but do pertain back to politics, refers to politics, who've said, that's for you to decide. I'm only here to give you information. What you wish to do with that information is entirely up to you. But then professors that try and shove their ideology down your throat, that's the problem I have. And that's why I do not recommend people learning about political science or international relations at universities. Almost everything I know, I taught myself. I didn't go to uni and take those classes and learn much. And I'm someone who looks at university as not a way to get a job. That's a very neoliberalized approach to thinking about it. Traditionally, universities are about the pursuit of knowledge and sharing that knowledge and truth and understanding and having a debate about it. I mean, you look at university adverts in Australia, and it's like, pick our uni because this many graduates get a job within this amount of time, or job this, job that. What are half the units in the degree? Almost fucking to do with jobs or internships. And it's... You wouldn't have even seen this 30 years ago in Australian universities, or 40 years ago at the very most. If it, jobs are about... If you want a job, go to a TAFE, go to a vocational educational institute, or perhaps if it's America, it would be considered a community college then, but not always, but typically I'd say. I could be wrong about that. I'm pretty sure that's how the American system works regarding that. So, is there anything else I would say about it? I should have put at the beginning of the video so you didn't have to get to this point. If you're still at this point, then Kurtiago Chebane appreciates you watching up to this point. And I know I've rambled. So, 31 minutes. Oh la la. Hez fucking blah, bitches.